Hey class, Dr. Doug Brown here. Happy Tuesday. I hope all is well. Now, normally you don't see me like this. I'm going to tell you why I got the ball cap on and just sort of chilled out because I want you to chill out. I want you to relax and just sort of take a few minutes to listen to the steps, the tips that I have in our discussion about the assignment this week. No need to be stressed out. Week 7, as we get ready to put together this final paper, it can be challenging. You can be stressed out about all the things you have to do. Writing this, paper with all these things that must be included, using all the feedback, all the information, the tips, it all can be challenging, stressful, and that's why I got the old ball cap on today, because I want you to chill out, just sit back a minute. Let's discuss what we're doing this week and discuss a few elements of your paper. Now, I intended on getting this shared yesterday, but I was focusing on your methodology and review of the literature, and I took a little extra time. Normally, I would have had that back to you yesterday, but I really wanted to look through those papers and really make sure that I got what you were trying to say. The topics were good, methodology was good, and that you were focusing really on that review of the literature. So it took a little more extra time this week than I normally take. I always want to give you good feedback, but this week was important because it's such an important piece of that final paper that we have coming due. Now, we don't have a discussion this week, which is good. It gives you more time to work on your paper. The short paper is not too bad as we talk about limitations, delimitations, and then our topic, our proposal, and again, prepare for that final. So gives you a little more time to do that. So what are these delimitations and limitations that we're talking about? Well, hopefully you've read page 44 of the textbook where you'll find these mentioned. A research proposal, once you take a look at it today, it all seems a little crazy. It can be overwhelming. It's sort of like getting a puzzle. I thought I might have a puzzle around here to show you. I'll try to keep one handy. Sort of like trying to put this puzzle together, all at one time, and it's got chili covered over it, and you're trying to figure out how to find the pieces to the puzzle. It can be a little crazy. It can be challenging trying to figure it all out. But once you get this paper together and you get my feedback and you set it down and you come back to it later on, whether this is your last class or you move on, it's all going to come together. It's all going to make sense, all those different pieces. It really does make sense. I can tell you, it's a crazy process. Seems that way because APA and some of the research that we're doing, really is a different language. So you're learning a different language, how to write, this class. And that can be a challenging thing, putting all those different pieces together. But just hang with me. I told you on day 1, just hang with me. We're going to get there. I'll try to give you some good feedback to help you along the way. So hopefully been using that feedback, and from what I see in the papers or what I see in the discussions, all the work that you've been doing, you've been using that feedback. You've been using those resources, those tools, those tips, those examples that we've shared throughout the class to help you. And I'm going to tell you, I'm proud of you. I've seen some writing. Just move forward. It is fantastic, each and every one. I don't have a student, not one of you, have not moved forward. You've all done a great job. I'm proud of you, and you've done a fantastic job moving forward in the class, and you're ready. You're ready to put those proposals together. I think you're ready. I look forward to seeing those final papers because I think they're going to be good. Now, I've told you a little bit in the past before I get to these delimitations and the limitations of the study, which are very important. When doing and I shared some of this in the research this week, when writing your paper, that literature review, aside from the layout and the running head and all those things that you need, that template that you should be using, in speaking that different language, everything must be in line and written from top to bottom so that it flows and the reader has a good idea about what you're trying to say. I want you to write for the reader that doesn't have a clue about what you're talking about. You know, when you talk about NFPA, well, most people have no idea what NFPA means, so spell that out and tell us what that means. Let us know. To you, you understand what that means, but not the reader. They don't know what that means. So you want to write for the lady down the road who's 85 years old, and you're presenting this to this lady or gentleman and asking them to read that and give you some feedback on it, and you want them to have some idea about what's going on. Like I told you before, we don't do it so much here, but if you move forward with research later on, you know, just like in my doctoral dissertation, I had to submit that to a website, and it evaluated a website so that I wrote between the 6th and the 8th grade level. That way, most everyone could understand what I was trying to say. And that's difficult for us to do in this business because, you know, we have so many acronyms and codes and things that we use, and it's difficult to do. So I want you to write that way. And that's one of the reasons you see me share feedback and ask you not to use contractions, not to begin sentences with conjunctions, that sort of thing. We've got to break it down and spell it out so that the reader can get it. But more on that later on as we move on to next week. So let's see. On page 44, you'll see limitations and delimitations. I'm going to try to break these down to make them easier for you. What's the limitations when we do our study? What are the limitations of that study? Well, think about that just a moment. Every study is going to have a limitation, right? That's what we cannot do. That's what we cannot do in the study. It's impossible to do it for whatever reason. What's a delimitation? And it's basically what we will not do. Now, most of this is part of qualitative research. A limitation basically are the shortcomings, the weaknesses, which the researcher doesn't have any control over. That may be, for example, if you would like to get run data on the ambulance service and it's a private company, well, they won't give you that run data. Not going to give it to you. It's not public information. They're not going to give it to you. That's a shortcoming. That's a weakness. We're not able to do that. We don't have any control over it. So rather than speculate what those runs are, what the run times are, if we can't get them from the rescue unit, if they note that information or dispatch or some other source, that's a limitation. We can't get, there's nothing we can do about it. We don't have any control over it. A delimitation, the boundaries the researcher outlines by making it something beyond the scope of the research project. Okay, those are things if we entered and went beyond that scope of that research. If we have a chosen topic and we enter this realm that goes beyond what we're trying to research in the project, that's a delimitation. Also, we can say these are characteristics that will limit the scope and describe the boundaries of the study. What's that mean? Okay, that could be a geographic area, it could be population, it could be the apparatus we have, the run information that we have or don't have, any of those things. So we want to talk about. You may identify a limitation. For example, you may state that a limitation of your study is that you only focused on your community. You did not focus on other communities or mutual aid or what could happen in another nearby community, such as a region, if you will. You don't have any information on that. You only focus the study on your particular department or agency or community. So that's one of the things that we could, take a look at, as well as part of those limitations and delimitations. So again, the delimitation, that's a limits within what you want to work in, those boundaries, if you will. And why you don't want to exceed those boundaries. You want to share why you don't want to exceed those boundaries. You're reducing the scope of your study, and here's why you're reducing the scope of your study. It's based upon your topic. It's based upon this is the information that you want to find out. You didn't want to know about the region. You didn't want to know about neighboring communities. You wanted to know about the leadership characteristics of your community, your fire department, not what happened somewhere else. So that's some of the things that you can focus on. We could also call a delimitation more specific. It's sort of the area of study according to your interest. So there's lots of things. There's a website that I'm getting this information from. It's from ResearchGate. So make sure I cite the sources. And you can go to researchgate.net and search for limitations, delimitations, and it will tell you this. Now keep in mind there's a difference in our quantitative and qualitative research. And it's important. It's important to keep that in mind. So you're not always going to see these terms in the different research you have. Most of what we're doing here is action research, so it's more qualitative than anything, versus quantitative, which focuses on numbers, statistics. Now I notice you have some of those, and yes, we can have some qualitative research that has some statistics in there based upon some studies and what we report, which is why we're using action research. So make sure you look at that methodology real close and continue to discuss that as well. And there's a lot of good sources on there. Again, page 44 is pretty good, and I want you to really take a look at that. Just keep in mind those limitations, delimitations can sort of distort our study, and that's why we want to try to have it focus. We want to narrow the topic, etc. Take also a look, and I put this in your feedback this week. Look at those research questions, how they're developed. And I shared some information with you during some of those tools getting started and announcements. Look at those research questions and how those are developed. There's a specific way that we need to ask those questions. They need to be open-ended questions. They don't need to be closed-ended. We need to limit them as far as how long the questions are, what they focus on, so that we get the specific information. And we don't want to lead anyone when we do this study. Now, I realize we're not, really using human subjects. We're doing action research, qualitative research, looking at peer-reviewed data, those primary and secondary sources. But we really want to make sure that it stays focused and follows that specific plan. So take a look at those research questions and how they're developed. If you don't mind, let me see if I can find. They should be listed in the Tooks book as well. But you can use Google Scholar. You can use Google Scholar, the library databases, to help you really write those research questions. For example, when I go to the Writing Center at gmu.edu, what I find here is very important, and I'd encourage you to look at that resource. Now, I'm sharing these resources with you. I can look them up. I can share them with you. Many of these I have on the top of my head I know about, but I want you to go to these sources and look at them, which is why I'm mentioning them. Okay, a research question is a question around which you center your research. The research question should be clear, focused, concise, complex, and arguable. So there are some steps to developing the research questions. Must be a general topic, an interesting general topic. You do the preliminary research on the general topic. Consider your audience. You're writing the paper in this case. You start asking questions, and then you evaluate, and then begin the research. They must be focused, they must be clear, and they must be appropriately complex, and then the arguable. What's arguable mean? Its potential answers are open to debate rather than accepted fact. All right, I'm going to say that again. Arguable. The potential research questions The answers are open to debate rather than accepted fact. As I mentioned to you before in some of the feedback, in this particular case, what are we doing? We are not trying to prove anything. Keep that in mind. Not trying to prove anything. What we're doing is discussing the findings that we find in the review of the literature, etc. So remember that. Okay, I've had you about 15 minutes. I know you're tired of talking or tired of listening to me talk. Thanks for stopping by. I'll check back in throughout the week. Again, we don't have a discussion, so you'll see me have some extra posts this week. If you have any questions, need my help, let me know. Keep rocking, and thanks again for all that you do. I'm proud of you.